Springboarding off of our discussion last week, I wanted to offer some thoughts on life sustaining and unyielding language as I see them being defined by Toni Morrison. Um, Now, my discussion of this focuses on definitions of the word yield, which has two basic definitions. One of them is to produce. Both of these are verbs. The second one is to give in or to surrender. So if a crop produces or if a crop yields good fruit, that means it produces the fruit. And if I yield to someone, then I give in to them or I surrender. So two uses of the word yield. Now, if we extend that to the gerund unyielding, it gives us two different adjectives. One is unproductive. So if something is unyielding, a field is unyielding, it is unproductive. It does not bring anything forth. The second definition of the word is that it's not apt to give way under pressure, it's inflexible and it's firm. It holds fast to something. So that those are two different ways of considering the adjective unyielding. Now, in terms of language, I wanted to look at how language can be unyielding using these two different definitions. And so I've charted them out, charted language use out on this axes, where on the bottom axis we have productivity, and on the other axis we have pliability. Now, productivity, this is building off of the two definitions for the word yield. So productivity, if language is productive, it's referring to its level of devotion to the processes of life. So it's continually bringing things forth, and it's committed to those processes that do produce things. Anything that is living or vital will continually produce things. It will bring things forth of itself and in relationship with other things. Now, if a language is pliable, it's referring to its degree of willingness to give in or surrender to and be changed by others and their needs and desires. So the willingness to change, to not necessarily be firm in itself, but to change in regard to others and what they need, and in that sort of relationship. Now, unyielding language is at the zero axis here. You see this point right here. This is unyielding language because it is stagnant. It is neither productive nor pliable. It is only firm in its resolve to itself, its own desires, and its own agenda. Now, it won't change in relation to the needs of anything else. It only holds fast to itself. Morrison says that it is firm. Well, let's see, what does she say? It's only committed to the free range of its own narcotic narcissism. So it's bound up in itself so much, it doesn't care about anything beyond the range of its own ego. So that's that kind of unyielding language. It's language that is neither productive nor pliable. And a good example of this, and I wanted to offer you a couple of examples, one of unyielding language, one of life-sustaining language, is from the 2016, or the run-up to the 2016 presidential campaign, where Donald Trump Jr. tweeted out this image here. He says, "This image says it all. Let's end the politically correct agenda that doesn't put America first." Whatever your political stance, this is, I think, very unproductive and potentially harmful language. It's very unyielding. If you look at the comparison here, if I had a bowl of Skittles and I told you just 3 would kill you, would you take a handful? Now, if we overlook the grammatical error here, this should be a comma, and that should be a lowercase w instead of 2 sentences. The comparison here is very unyielding and it's the rhetoric is violent. So if I had a bowl of Skittles and I told you just 3 would kill you, would you take a handful? That's our Syrian refugee problem. Now, the problem that I see here with this language is that it's comparing Skittles, which are candy, they're edible things, has no nutritional value, to human beings who were displaced from their country and they are seeking somewhere new to live. So the comparison of candy to human beings does multiple things, one of which is it dehumanizes these people. These very real people who are seeking refuge from their own problems, a very from a crisis in their own country. And another problem with that is that you don't eat people. Cannibalism is frowned upon. It's one of our greatest taboos as human beings that you don't just eat people. So it's again, this is it's dehumanizing language. It's not willing to give in to anyone else's position, and it only sees the other human beings as things to be eaten or used for my own benefit or pleasure. It doesn't look beyond that or move beyond that to see the nuances in the situation or the crisis that these people are carrying. So that's an example of a fairly good example, I think, of unyielding language. It refuses to see another person's point of view, and it reduces whole groups of people to being less than human, to being something edible and disposable with no nutritional or substantial value. So that's an example of unyielding language. Now, if we move back out here, we move to life-sustaining language. Now, if we look here on the grid, life-sustaining language is, you see this field here, this green band. That's where I see life-sustaining language happening. It is now, in terms of pliability, we want our language and our position, our behavior, our attitudes to be changeable to a certain degree. We don't want to be unchangeable or unwilling to listen to what other people have to say or to change based off of any points they might have to offer or to change based off of our realization of their humanness. But if we get farther up here, we also don't want to change according to everyone's desires and needs. We need to have some grounding in our own selves, in our own moral values and belief systems, etc. Otherwise, we're just tossed back and forth, and we become fickle, and that's also an unproductive stance to be in. So again, I see this green band as a good place for where we're pliable to a degree. We're willing to change based off of others' opinions, but not so willing that we give up everything and just go along with everything that they have to say. Now, if you look at this gray arrow shooting up here, now originally, as I was thinking about this, I thought perhaps this was where life-sustaining language would be, because it's continually productive. It's growing more and more in terms of the abundance of what we have in the world, of growing and changing based off of, well, and producing more and more things based off of the resources that we have, the diversity that's on the planet, and among the different people that we have here interacting. That can be a continually productive position to be interacting with those groups of people. But if we look at, again, this exponential growth linear growth rather, just goes up and up and up and up. The problem with that, again, as I mentioned before, is that it moves past this green zone and it just becomes fickle and unchanging. And when that happens, that language, that attitude becomes less and less productive because we are changing far too much. So as I've modeled it here, the life-sustaining language is pliable to a certain degree, again within this green band, and that might be different for every person perhaps, but this expresses a willingness to change and to be to give in, to surrender to another's point of view to a certain degree while still holding fast to the things that I hold and value within my own life, within my community, within my culture. So life-sustaining language has a bit of exponential growth, and then it levels off here and becomes continually productive. I think that's the zone of proximal development, where we come into contact with other people and ideas, and we weigh out those ideas and we change based off of the good ones, and we continually again hold tight to the things that we believe in, to the moral values that we hold and value. And then we can continually be productive with that and produce new things together as we interact in this zone. So that's where I see life-sustaining language happen. And again, it's not super pliable, but it is pliable enough that it in its interaction with other things, that it gives way and also holds fast to itself and its moral values. So an example of life-sustaining language, which, let me come back to this really quickly, is firm in its commitment to life and agency, again, to the processes of life, the things that keep us vital as individuals, as communities, etc. And an example of this, this is from Toni Morrison's Nobel lecture, where she's talking about Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. In this part that I've highlighted in green here, it says, when a president of the United States thought about the graveyard his country had become and said, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what they did here. His simple words are exhilarating in their life-sustaining properties because they refused to encapsulate the reality of 600,000 dead men in a cataclysmic race war. Refusing to monumentalize, disdaining the final word, the precise summing up, acknowledging their poor power to add or detract, his words signal deference to the uncapturability of the life it mourns. Now, this language, it reaches beyond itself. It doesn't seek to monumentalize or to encapsulate a single idea or to, and it's open to the possibilities of life beyond itself. And that's what I think Lincoln was saying. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what they did here. His language reaches beyond itself to not necessarily seek to encapsulate the lives of those 600,000 dead men, but to point toward their sacrifice. And that's what I see life-sustaining language doing. It opens toward possibility. It does not seek to give the final word or to sum things up. And it acknowledges the limits of language. It doesn't try to pull everything down into it or to tie everything into a nice little bow, but it acknowledges that there is far more working beyond the words that we offer and the monuments that we place up. Now, such language, like she mentions here, refuses to monumentalize. It doesn't hold anything up to a single monolith. A monolith is a single stone monument. It's unyielding, it's immovable, but it also represents just one thing. Now, life-sustaining language, like I mentioned, opens toward possibilities. It encourages us to reach and to think beyond ourselves. Whereas, again, unyielding language, as we've described it in this class, is language that is only concerned with itself. In terms of life-sustaining language, there is an unyielding component. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is in the sense of unyielding in that it is firm. It holds fast to the thing that it's committed to. So its life-sustaining language is unyielding in the one sense of the word yield, that it is firmly committed to the processes of life. And because of that, it is continually productive. It opens toward possibility. Whereas unyielding language, as we've defined it, is unyielding in both in both senses of the word unyielding. It is both unproductive and it's firm in its commitment to itself. It doesn't care about anything else. So hopefully those thoughts are useful for you as you're working on your own essays and thinking about these two different ideas of life-sustaining and unyielding language.